Again. Where do you live, Emily?
Oak Cliff.
Oak Cliff? Yell it. Say it like you're proud.
Oak Cliff. Everybody, sing with me.
I love Oak Cliff. I would never move out of Oak Cliff. There is no other place in Dallas better than Oak Cliff.
Before it was known as Oak Cliff, the area across from the Trinity River was first the indigenous land of the Kickapoo, Humanos, Tawaniki, Comanche, Caddo, and Wichita tribes and bands. The first white settlement was recorded in 1837, when William S. Beatty and the Leonard and Combs family settled. Another family headed by William Henry Horde settled in the area in the 1840s, purchasing upwards of 650 acres of land. Under the toll of enslaved labor, this area was developed as a farming community until enterprising developers Thomas L. Marsalis and John S. Armstrong came to the area in 1887 with the plan to market the community as a prestigious residential area. They purchased large amounts of land and named the subdivision Oak Cliff as a more sophisticated nameplace than the previous Hordes Ridge. Through their efforts, Oak Cliff incorporated as a city in 1890, electing Hugh Ewan to be the first mayor. Advertised as the Cambridge of the South, the community flourished. However, disagreements led to a split in the Marsalis-Armstrong partnership. As a result, Marsalis stayed in Oak Cliff, and Armstrong went on to develop a community north of the Trinity that became known as Highland Park. A financial downturn in 1893 brought the development to a sudden halt. In 1903, the financially burdened city of Oak Cliff voted to annex itself to the city of Dallas. Oak Cliff and Dallas were now one, though its separation from the central city by the Trinity River helped to give Oak Cliff a permanent and unique identity. And so Oak Cliff was thriving as a sort of utopia for the white middle and upper classes, and developed exponentially with various neighborhoods and schools. Neighborhoods like Kings Highway, Sunset Hills, Kidd Springs, and schools like the Oak Cliff High School, later renamed W.H. Adamson, Sunset High School, and Rosemont Elementary.
When we first moved in, it was predominantly white, and it was really a nice neighborhood. Oakley Street is near the intersection of South Lancaster Road and Keys Boulevard. And they had just opened up the very first air-conditioner mall, South Oak Cliff Mall. And all the big department stores, Sears, you know, I mean, you name them, they were there. And it was really a nice area. We had a Catholic churches by, we had a little medical centers, theaters. That's why my parents selected that neighborhood, because they felt it was something that we wanted to live in. I moved to Oak Cliff after my parents moved to Oak Cliff. They moved in the 60s, and I married in 56. Lived off of Ross Avenue for a while. And then my parents getting up in age, you know, and we were having some problems. And so we decided to move closer to them. And we bought a home on at the corner of Hampton and 5 Mile Parkway on the southern part of Keys Park. And in fact, I'm there to this day.
We finally moved out of West Dallas in 1977, and we moved to Oak Cliff, because at that time Oak Cliff was where many of us from West Dallas thought that that's where we were moving up to.
We lived in West Dallas on Baton Street in a very tiny home, 3 rooms, 1 bedroom, 1 living room / dining room, and a small kitchen. And then we moved. I was 13 years old when we moved to Oak Cliff. I lived on Melba, 205 Melba. The house is still there.
The main things that I could relate to was more room in the house. We had a bigger house. We had a lawn. Didn't have a lawn in West Dallas. It was just mainly dirt. The streets were unpaved in West Dallas. We went outside to the outside restroom, excuse me, when we lived there. Now, when we moved to Oak Cliff, it was a little bit modern. The living was a little bit more modern. People lived quite different. It wasn't as primitive as West Dallas was. When it rained, the streets didn't flood. They had sewers where the rain ran off the streets. We had a driveway where we could park the car. I felt safe getting on my bicycle, riding wherever I wanted to. I didn't feel like I was ever unsafe. But of course, when I lived in West Dallas, I wasn't old enough to do that. But I knew that my parents always spoke about all the crime that was over there and all the nightclubs up and down Singleton. And so we didn't stray far from the house. We mostly just stayed in the yard. But when I moved to Oak Cliff, you didn't have to stay in the yard. You could go up the street to a friend's house.
You know, all my DISD schools were there in Oak Cliff until I got to be a senior. But I loved it. We were 4 blocks from Cowart Elementary, Leela P. Cowart Elementary, it's still there, on Ravinia. We lived on Poinsettia. We were 4 blocks from Leela P. Cowart. We walked to school. To me, it was nothing abnormal that there were no other Hispanics in my classes. We were probably one of 5 families in Oak Cliff at that time that were Hispanic.
You know how the schools will have all the pictures of all like the basketball teams and all that? And so I remember the bookshelves, the display shelves, when you walked into the front of the school, it was all white pictures of kids and stuff. And I'm thinking like, well, I've never seen any of those white kids in our school. But what had happened is, and it happened very quickly, you know, people, it wasn't like a white family decided to move one day and then another one next month. I mean, these people literally moved out within weeks of each other.
In 1975, I had already been a child welfare investigator for 3 years in Dallas by that time. And I knew that neighborhood did not have many child abuse reports made on the neighborhood. So I knew it was a place I wanted to be, so I would rarely run into clients. And so that's one reason I moved there. Second, the prices of homes were absolutely ridiculously low because of white flight. That was right after white flight had exploded in '69. And people were leaving Oak Cliff by the thousands. White people were leaving Oak Cliff. And realtors were trying to direct me away from this house. But the minute I saw it, I fell in love with that place.
You know, when we moved to Oak Cliff, would have been roughly around 1970. I was in the 2nd grade. And I would say, you know, I mean, the neighborhood was predominantly white. And by the time we left that area and moved on, it was almost everybody had moved away that was living there when we moved in.
There was a white family in our neighborhood. I think that was the only family in a few blocks where I lived. So yeah, that white flight was real and I didn't experience it. I saw it for myself. For some reason, that family left. Like I said, they weren't very vocal, or it didn't seem like it bothered them to live in our neighborhood. Our neighborhood was very quiet. It was mostly families, but they decided to leave. White flight, experienced in neighborhoods across America, was a rapid exodus of white residents fleeing communities as residents of color moved into the area. This ethnocentric migration was propagated by the federal government and real estate industry as white residents feared, amongst other things, the decrease in their home values as Black and Hispanic residents moved into the neighborhood.
Well, when we first moved in, live in a cul-de-sac of 14 homes, very nice little neighborhood. When we first moved in, we were the only non-white family. And so that was, I'm sure it was a cultural shock for the neighbors, but they were very nice, at least outwardly. Later, within 6 months to a year, the first white neighbor started moving out, and we learned later that he was the title manager at the company where we had closed on our loan, never told us. So he moved out. By within 10 to 15 years, the neighborhood, my little cul-de-sac, had changed as more African Americans at first started moving in, and then Mexican Americans, and then Mexican immigrants.
72, 73, when I moved to Kessler Parkway. Well, at that time I was doing some housing for the government that they called them at that time 243s, because they used to do houses, the government, and I was doing the electrical on those houses, so therefore I was connected with plumbers, painters, so we did some trade. When I bought the house, I said, well, I don't want to move in until we clean it up, fix it up, paint it and stuff like that. But when I moved in, after 3 months that I purchased it, that's when they saw me, my wife, and my children's there, and that's when they said, no, you can't live here. I said, well, why not? Of course, but then my friend, an Anglo guy named John Trapegan, that I love him to death, he already passed, he's with the Lord now. We become like brothers. So that's the one that he said, they're gonna run you out of there because you're not Anglo. They're gonna run you off. And of course, I didn't understand. I said, why? I said, well, they don't want Mexicans or people of color, people there on the neighborhood, which it was pretty much 98, 100% Anglos. Yeah. And I had that experience, but it didn't bother me. To the contrary, I said, hey, I'm gonna show you that I can make money and I'm smart just as you are. Ain't no different between you and I did. Then after years.
But they gathered a petition.
They gathered a petition to run me off, but they couldn't because they could not run me off. I purchased the house. And then after years, I showed that, hey, there's good people on all the races, there's bad people on all the races. And some of the neighbors, after several years, man, they can hardly see the daylight to give me a hug and help me on my house projects and stuff. And I proved to them, hey, I'm just like anybody.
So I'm a positive outcome of white flight, because during that time, that neighborhood evacuated overnight. All the white residents sold out very quickly, and African Americans bought in. A lot of second generation college African Americans, and I was the only non-Hispanic in my school till 2 years later, my sister, and then 2 years later, my other sister. By the time my last three siblings went to the school, there were a few more Hispanics, but during the time I was there, the only Hispanics there were my siblings.
It was interesting because we started seeing the Catholic Church, St. James Catholic Church, but we started seeing that we attended. We started seeing more Hispanics coming to it, and more Hispanics and more Blacks. And we started seeing the whites leaving it, And eventually they put a Hispanic minister, priest, that started having a mass in Spanish, And that brought up even more people on it. And the neighborhood started changing to a lot of Hispanics, or Mexican Americans on it. And the need was there,
Before living in Oak Cliff, we lived near Maple, so near like Little Mexico. Like there were some apartments near Pike Park that my family actually lived in. The family was just getting too big. It was like too many of us living in, those small apartments. So the next best thing they thought when looking around was Oak Cliff because of the predominantly Mexican American and Mexican presence there. I think a lot had to do with familiarity. You see Jefferson Street is really close to Clarendon. And so Jefferson Street is like one of the huge commerce centers in Oak Cliff that are predominantly Mexican. And there's a lot of, you know, Mexican groceries, there's restaurants, there's quinceañera dresses, wedding dresses. So I guess that made her feel comfortable moving her family there, knowing that not only would they have a home to live, but they would have places to go to, entertainment-wise, or just to leisure activities.
You know, I went off to college, got my degree and everything, and when I came back, it was probably in the 80s. It seemed like it had completely turned around, that, you know, there were white people had left and the Hispanics had moved in. Started seeing a few more Hispanic businesses, and then of course in the 90s it kind of took over. So that was the difference. I mean, I saw it in the 60s when I was a kid, and then in the 90s to see it completely switch over was for me, it was okay. I mean, we were able to get menudo and tamales when we were.
Don't imagine it now. Imagine that you had to drive far to buy tortillas or pan dulce or any of those kind of things. I know you can buy pan dulce and tortillas at 7-Eleven now, but back then it wasn't ubiquitous like now. You really had to travel. And so my uncle having that bakery that you could buy pan dulce and you can buy tortillas and things like that was a godsend, right? Wasn't on every corner. Just to give you an idea, my uncle even shipped bread to Florida, right? So it wasn't the Hispanicness of our area is not what people experience now. There really was a drought of not able to get the food ingredients and the food and the culture and the music like you do now.
Cuando no encontrabas más de que una tienda mexicana en el centro de Dallas, nunca se me va a olvidar que era uno de los lugares que visitábamos, porque encontrabas algo de México, y entonces el crecimiento demográfico latino, mexicano, poco a poquito fue en auge, creciendo, y ya no había solo una tienda allá, sino empezaron a abrir muchos lugares en diferentes espacios, y ahora nos quedamos sorprendidos. Las tiendas más grandes como Fiesta, como El Río, como tiendas de ese tipo, pues tienen realmente todo lo que tú quieras de México, ¿no? Y lo manejan los trabajadores mexicanos.
So Oak Cliff has become very much a center of Hispanic activity. And like I said, they grew from 10% to what over, I guess 70% now. Estamos creciendo.
I grew up in that area. I remember going to the grocery stores. I bought my quinceañera dress at one of the boutiques there. Actually, all three of my sisters did. And even my cousin, who's from Tennessee, traveled to Dallas to buy her quinceañera dress on Jefferson Street, because it has that special quality, right? It's a strip where you see back to back to back, or you used to anyways, back to back to back Latino businesses ranging from food to clothing to boots to quinceañera services like limo, mariachi, cadets. I don't know if they even have that little office off Jefferson. But you could find everything there, literally. It was like a little Mexican utopia. Yeah.
I remember being in high school and going to punk shows at, I think it was called the Ice House at the time. That was a lot of fun, and just I don't know, probably doing things I shouldn't have been doing when I was a kid. But yeah, that was a big form of entertainment for us.
I think what we have, our name is Colorado Park, which they call Lake Cliff Park is the real name. Found that out years later. Played soccer there, played soccer in El Baldillo, and street racing in the parking lot, street racing with our bikes, roller skating, canicas, everything you could imagine. It was just a fun experience.
One of my favorite memories growing up is I believe it's called Westmoreland Heights Shopping Center. I could be changing a few words, but it's adjacent to Westmoreland and Falls Drive. That was walking distance for my mom and I. And then my dad, you know, after their divorce, he would stop by and see me every Wednesday and pick me up every other weekend. But when he would pick me up on Wednesdays, or even my mom, we would always go to that shopping center. And I would always enjoy going to the thrift store, which is still there. And, you know, my dad was a payaso, a clown. And I remember as soon as we would walk into thrift store and you would see the racks of clothes, at the very beginning of that aisle of racks of clothing, he'd be like, all right, are you ready? And I'm like, okay. And we would run. You see an old man, like older man, but in his 40s running, and then a little girl running behind him. So he was always very playful. And then my mom and I would always go to that thrift stores as well. That's where I got my first bike, my toys and all of that. And they used to sell like small bags of random toys for $2. So that was always exciting because I had like a random set of bags. Going to the dollar store too. So I just really enjoyed going to the stores with my parents, and it was just so much fun for me.
When the Mavericks won whatever it is they're supposed to win, I can't remember, something to do with basketball, and everyone flooded the streets because it was just an exciting time. And back in the day on Clarendon, people used to cruise. When I was younger, this was before they stopped it. By the time I got old enough to go cruising, they had already made it illegal. But that happened, and so I felt, I don't know, kind of this elation that I got to experience that. That's like one of my most fondest memories of Oak Cliff. It was great. It was wonderful.
Yeah, so entertainment-wise, because my family was very religious, we would go to a lot of the church events that they had in Oak Cliff. So the fairs or the carnivals that some of the local parishes would have, that was like entertainment for my family. But as I got older, there was a little more opportunity for me to move outside of that environment. And there was a huge thing I remember when I was a teenager, and me and my sisters, we would cruise around Clarendon. It was like a big thing. And it was only on Sunday after 6. So like from 6 to 9, like random teenagers would get in their parents' cars and they would cruise, and they would like blare music, and they would stop either at Stella Snow Cone or another snow cone place on Clarendon. I remember, because we would be riding in a minivan, a green minivan. But we were young people. We didn't want to stay in the house during the summer, you know. We wanted to you know, see the boys and talk to boys, and they were into that. So there was like lowriders, us in the minivan, just random people that would just like, I don't know, it was like and at that time there was like no social media. So it was just kind of word of mouth. People were like, yeah, Sunday at 6, we're gonna cruise. And you had like the lowriders, the really nice lowriders. You had like the average teenagers. You had like, you know, big trucks, the pickup trucks. Yeah, I remember distinctly that, because after a few weeks of just people cruising constantly, people were calling the cops on us because we were causing traffic. There was too much traffic in that area. And I think to this day, if you go to Clarendon, there's a sign that says no cruising on Sundays with a certain time. So, sorry, no cruising on Sundays.
We are in Country Burger on Hampton. This is a great spot. Their burgers are delicious. The first time I ever came here was whenever I was like 13, and it was for quinceañera practice. We had just finished doing our dances and stuff, and for one of my friends' quinceañeras, and we came back here as a group, and her dad bought us all burgers, and I loved it because it wasn't like a chain. It was something that was like special here in Oak Cliff. As like an elementary school student, I did this project on like the smoking fry. So I put like different chains, French fries in jars to see how long it took them to decompose, and thinking about like what that's doing to your body. And so like after I came here, I got their fries, and they broke down fairly quickly in like 3 days, which is good considering that it just means that there's not a lot of preservatives. And the food is very yummy, and if you just like look around, it's such a beautiful place because of all the Salina memorabilia and the fun games.
Yeah, the last time I was here was for a community meeting, which, you know, you think a burger place, like community meetings, how does that connect? And it was just like a place for the community to be like, all right, let's get together, strategize on this X issue they were having. And every single time I walk in here, it's just beautiful that they honor a Mexican American from Texas, Corpus Christi, and it just gives me the chills seeing her photos. Selena Quintanilla Perez, she was just like an amazing individual, and to be able to walk to a burger joint where you get good burgers and then you just see so many of her images, it's just really beautiful. It's a very, I think it's a huge staple in the Oak Cliff community, Country Burger.
Our community has to be resourceful, relentless, tenacious. We grew up in apartments where when I was growing up, pandillas were a big thing. You had Junior Homeboys, West Dallas, East Dallas, DuckTales, the list goes on. It's survival. You grow up, either you bully or get bullied. You learn how to fight. You go box at Casa Guanajuato. You go box in West Dallas at Anita Martinez. There's Bloods, there's Cribs, there's Vatos Locos, the list goes on. That's the environment that I grew up in. Now, why am I proud? It's systematic. When you grow up in a neighborhood where you don't have the resources and the opportunities, you have to survive. You have to work. You have to hustle. When you grow up in a neighborhood where you have food deserts, so then that leads to people having health issues. But at the end of the day, you grew up in apartments where you're playing kickball, you're playing loteria, you're playing la pirinola. You grew up in a community where the neighbor's gonna share a tomato even though it's the last tomato they have. It's a combination of both high violence, poverty rate, but then amazing people who have dreams and are just trying to make it with what they have.
Oak Cliff is a wonderful place because there are a lot of giving people that you could find in Oak Cliff, and I really owe it to them for just being where I am today. And diversity, the ganas, you just see so many people really fighting every single day to give back to a community, or you see them working hard for their children. That's why I feel like I need to protect it from others that have different values. And that's part of the reason why I decided to be an urban planner, because urban planning is what was one of the many tools that was used to take away land from people. And so for me, being an urban planner, it's like, all right, I'm on the other side now, but I'm not on the dark side of it. I'm here to do the good. And as an urban planner, that is what really fuels me, is that I want to be the change that the planning field owes for all these communities.
The gentrification that's happening in Oak Cliff, again, another transition, gentrification, changing communities, changing neighborhoods, changing schools.
I see a big transition now, Oak Cliff. Unfortunately, some of it not all good. There are too many apartments being built, and they're knocking down some of the houses of people, and they're making it hard to find affordable houses in there. I guess like everything that's happening here in Dallas, that's what's happening in Oak Cliff, especially the Bishop Arts area, you know. My wife and I are fortunate enough to live in what's called the Kessler Park area, and we see the transition, more apartments and younger people, I see a lot of white people, young couples moving in there too. But we need to keep affordable housing going. We need to have a better service in the south part of Dallas. The city has not done a very good job.
The area around Methodist proper there, around Methodist Dallas, has changed so dramatically in the time that I've been there. And you can't go anywhere without seeing the new construction, the houses that I've seen over the years, they're gone, new ones pop up. Where one house was, 10 condos are now, it just amazes me. And, I've gotten some wind of the prices of things, and it's really, skyrocketed, I'll say that. And even in the most recent issue of D Magazine, they talk about Oak Cliff and how high the real estate is in Oak Cliff. And, in the Bishop Arts District, it's a lot of fun, but it is really encroached on that neighborhood there surrounding it. And I guess, to some people that's been good and it's been a boom for them, but others, I know they hate it, actually.
Who want to move to Oak Cliff? I would say if they are able to move to Oak Cliff right now, they've got a lot of money saved up. I wanted to live in Oak Cliff. I tried everything I could. 10 years ago, when I went through a divorce, I became a single man. I wanted to move back to my roots. And I tried to find a house that I could buy. Couldn't find one that I could afford, because even the house that I grew up in had the value of it was something that I couldn't even afford. I would think the biggest percentage of people moving to Oak Cliff are not even from Dallas. So what I would tell a young person now who is moving back into Oak Cliff, I would ask them why. And probably their answer would be, because that's where the action is. It's an up-and-coming entertainment environment over there, the Bishop Arts District, plenty of music venues, restaurants, and it has a lot of attractions, except for the fact that the real estate is way overvalued. You have 75 or 80-year-old homes with square footage of 800 or 900 square feet that is going for $300,000, and it's just it's not attainable to a big percentage of young people unless they are from that computer age. They've managed to learn how to program, and they've learned computer technology, and those are the ones that are earning wages high enough to afford a house in Oak Cliff, unfortunately.
The aesthetic of Oak Cliff is changing, because when you drive through my neighborhood, you're seeing just really strange houses being built. They just seem abnormal. They seem out of place. They seem as though a middle-class income would not be able to purchase that, And then further out, when talking about my elementary and middle school, they look the same. The structures look the same. I don't think they've added anything that I can remember, or when I passed through there, not much has changed. So in terms of schools, I can say very little has changed. But I definitely noticed the houses that they tend to buy, and they tend to flip and make it into a just very, I don't want to say ugly, because architecture is not ugly, but it's just not my taste. It's something that I wouldn't consider something that's familiar to the Oak Cliff neighborhood, and it just really stands out in a bad way, in an ugly way. And even driving out of like the Clarendon area, when you're driving towards Jefferson and Davis, you definitely see this presence where it's very in your face. You have these tall condos in very tight spaces where there was actual family homes, right? You notice it in the traffic, where sometimes there's some corners that there's so many people trying to get in a certain area that people are just honking their horns trying to get to the other side. Like, I'm just trying to buy bread. I'm trying to go to my bakery, you know? And so that's problematic because it kind of just disrupts the flow or the leisure activities of people. And so I've noticed it within the neighborhood I grew up in and outside of that neighborhood. So Oak Cliff is changing, but I don't believe it's changing for the people that live there.
You could just, I mean, it's obvious, right? If the how like the one on the left, like that's
Oh no.
But
There's a for sale sign.
What? Okay,
Look, this is a plaza, right?
Okay, wait, hold on. I'll say I lived in this property. What? I didn't even know it was for sale. That's sad. I wonder why. Yeah, I grew up not at that house, but behind it. Wow, that's
So this
really
is the house that
sad.
had the garage?
Yeah, it might still be back there actually. You screwed up maybe? Yeah, that wasn't there. The plaza thing wasn't. The fountain. They tore it down. Yeah, it's gone. It used to be like an alleyway. What? Sorry, I'm like in shock. Wow. Well, damn. Yeah, that's where I grew. That's for sale. I wonder how much it costs. You should look it up.
I know.
You should look it up. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah, they were always working on the house, and I don't know what happened. Who knows?
Wow. 249,000. Did it look like that when you lived there, Jen?
Oh, no.
No, it didn't. Probably not, right? Oh my god, that's oh my gosh.
My god.
I hate it whenever people like update with the tackiest stuff. Oh my goodness.
What is that?
Oh, you know, they probably got it on sale and they're like, let's go with it.
Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they sold it much cheaper and then they're able to price it up. Oh my god. Yeah, well, I grew up there and now I wouldn't be able to afford to get it. Wow. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to afford to live there. That is... I wonder why they moved out. Who knows?
Wow. That's 75211.
Yeah. I wouldn't be able to afford that. I wouldn't. That is wild. I wasn't expecting for this to happen today. I was hoping they would be there parked so I could knock on their door or something. Before. But the inside did not look like that. That's for sure. Oh my god.
Before I left Oak Cliff for the last time, I used to live in this house on Melba. It was a corner house right next to Bishop. We rented the top part of it from this woman, Tracy Popkin. She was a business owner in Bishop, and it was a cute little house. The entire block was filled with, you know, people like me, a lot of Mexican families and stuff like that. I left there and I had heard about all of the building in Bishop. And I heard that they were tearing down houses. Sorry. I heard that they were tearing down houses there. So this was, oh my gosh. Sorry. I went back some years after. And I drove around that corner, and every house had been torn down.
but hers was standing. And all I could do was think about all those people, all the people that had lived there before. Where did they go? They made them leave their houses. It was just terrible. She was able to keep her house. She was able to fight for it. She had the know-how. She had the time. She had the ability. She had the voice to be able to fight for her house. And those other people? No. They were working. They were taking care of their kids. They didn't speak English well enough to even know what was going on. And so they're gone. Who knows where? And I'm sure she's somewhere in Bishop selling her wares. It just breaks my heart. I get invited to go down to Bishop all the time by my friends who don't understand. They didn't grow up in Oak Cliff, so they don't get it when I say I don't want to go down there. I don't want anything to do with any of that.
Would I recommend my friends move to Oak Cliff? In some ways, yes. In others, maybe no. I think it would depend on the friend, because I have a lot of friends from university where, like in their profession, they get paid a lot. So they might be more willing to pay gentrification prices. And, you know, of course, I don't want that to be pushing out some other people who have been here for a longer time. So I think just considering like who it is and maybe where they would be moving. Because there are some friends I would definitely, like, I would love to have some friends nearby me to like have a shorter distance and travel or what have you. But also I think about some of the people who are moving into the community, and of course, like people who have the cultural competency to move in. Like for instance, if you have a problem with like loud music, maybe Oak Cliff isn't for you. We like bumping music. We like driving and like hearing it, you know, feeling it. And if you're the kind of person who's gonna call the cops on that, maybe, I don't know, maybe it's not a match.
A lot of people had to move, and they've been selling their properties for good money, and you know, they buy other houses. But my father said, we're not selling. They have tried, and he's like, we're not selling.
They are after my house. I have a little contemporary house at the corner of Hampton and 5 Mile Parkway, surrounded by pecan trees, and I get a call just about every day. Yes, they want my house.
I personally wanted to live in Oak Cliff. I wanted to purchase my first home in Oak Cliff. But unfortunately, I couldn't afford the homes that were being sold in Oak Cliff. So I had to look elsewhere. I had to look outside of Oak Cliff to purchase my first home. So it has in fact impacted me in that I couldn't purchase the first home in the neighborhood that I grew up in. Because as a taxpayer, your money's going straight to the neighborhood. You're paying that teacher salary, you're paying, you're helping the school system, right? And so I wanted to have that. I wanted to be able to, you know, walk my dog in my neighborhood that I grew up. I wanted to visit the places that I enjoy, like groceries. Even though I don't live in Oak Cliff, I still drive into Oak Cliff to buy groceries sometimes, because there's just something about a neighborhood that you grew up in. It just feels familiar. It feels comfortable, you know. And so even though I don't live in that neighborhood, I still waste my dollars there because I know it deserves it, and I value it that much that I drive in.
My advice to people who are experiencing the pressures of gentrification is to for you to have the option to decide, do you want to stay or do you rather leave? It's all about making sure folks have the option and they're not forced, pushed out, right? And so it's like taking that power back. And so in that, being more specific would be, don't always believe the things you receive in the mail. Make sure that if any outreach you receive is accurate, because sometimes some folks may say, oh, this is a letter from the city, and I'm like, the city, what? So it's always making sure folks are aware with, and don't trust what you hear or see, but also be aware and to have an influence with what's going on in your own community. And that's what I really talk with people a lot about, is be aware of the zoning changes that happen in your community. Speak up. Speak up as the city of Dallas is working on the West Oak Cliff area planning, which is basically a land use plan that's going to guide development and investment for years to come. But in that document, the one thing you're gonna see is a vision statement. You wanna make sure that that vision statement captures what you want to see in your community. Because at the end of the day, it is where you are. And I also speak as a renter because my parents never never owned property in Oak Cliff, but I don't feel lesser than those who do own property. I was a resident, I still gave back to my community as a renter. And so even I'm speaking for renters and property owners, own your neighborhood, speak up, participate during the West Oak Cliff area planning meetings, make sure that the drafts and the document actually reflects your inspiration and desires for you and your family and your friends. And you are the leader, you're the spearhead. And so, but to be able to do that obviously entails encouragement. No se decepcionen, don't be upset, right? Push, have the ganas to keep pushing forward. And like I said from part of this conversation, which is why I am in urban planning and we started Rayo Planning, is because we know that our community doesn't always understand how things happen, but they have the ganas. So we're just there to facilitate and help people. The power that we do have is in our voice and to coming together to make sure that there are opportunities for us to live here and to advocate for affordability.
You know, for a long time, when I would be out there with my friends, they would ask me, where you live? I said, Oak Cliff. They'd go, oh, you know, on it. But now, when I say I live in Oak Cliff, they say, oh, really, you live in Bishop Arts? Where do you live? You know, there's a lot of neighborhoods that are really coming back up on it. And it's a positive thing, you know. What we need to do is keep working together, all of us, black, white, and brown, to make it better.
There are a lot of people in Oak Cliff that have amazing potential and they don't even see it in themselves. And I feel like I was one of those people for a long, long time.
When I went to college, everyone was studying us, the poor kids, the brown kids, the colored kids. And I had the biggest advantage of everyone, that I didn't have to learn it from a book. I lived it.
And so in that darkness and confusion, the only thing we could hold on to that no one could take away from us is the strength inside, the ganas. And that's what my parents would always tell me, to like have faith and keep pushing through.
if you have family members who are older and live in Oak Cliff, make sure that you've had conversations with them about who is inheriting the house after they pass. Make sure you have a plan and you document all of that, so that way their hopes for that property can truly happen after they do ascend, because it's something that can be so hard to get through after the fact if it hasn't been explicitly stated.
There was an article that came out that during COVID about a study being made that showed why Hispanics were the essential workers, and that's why we were still working. Of course, we didn't need a study for that. That being said, in Oak Cliff, that's what represents hardworking class folks. So that's why when you have a community now is being described that is vibrant and popping and popular, at the cost of what? The displacements of families, and that's not right.
That's poppin', yeah. Pleasant Grove, that's poppin', yeah. GP, that's poppin', yeah. Oak Cliff, what's poppin', yeah, that's poppin'. This is how I feel to be a G ride. Why you need a side chick when you got the seaside? Boy, I rep the city everywhere that I go, and my city taking over. If you down, let me know, let me know. Look, this is how I feel to be a G ride.